and welcome to today's webinar. We would like to start by telling you that if there's a market that's truly volatile, then it's today's market. And we have been dealing with trade wars, supply chain disruptions, and fluctuations in interest rates more than we have had before. And the technological shifts with the geopolitical tension that is existing right now in the environment that we live in, it's not just about acting fast enough. It's also about doing the right thing at the right time. So, here we have a session with Oliver Guirdham on competitive intelligence. And Oliver Guirdham is the CEO of the business research company. Hello and welcome to the webinar today. Oliver, over to you.
Hello, everybody. Nice to be with you this morning. It's still just about morning my time in the UK. Yes. So the business research company, we're well, I guess it's self-explanatory if you don't know about us. We do research on businesses. We do a lot of reports in different market areas, and we do a lot of customized research. Where we go out and find out specific information right across the kind of intelligence environment. So everything from supplier intelligence, market intelligence, competitive intelligence, regulatory intelligence, customer intelligence, anything basically that can go into your business planning, into your go-to-market strategy. But today we're talking about competitive intelligence, um, which is one of the key areas of this, which is not just understanding your business and your customers, which is probably perhaps the first and most important step, but also understanding your competitive environment and what companies around you, organizations around you are doing. Just a bit of housekeeping. I think we'll stop for a couple of times for questions. And the session will be about 35 to 40 minutes long in total, including the questions. So why track your competitors? So in B2B sales, so when companies are competing with each other, 68% of deals face direct competition. So effectively, when you're responding to a request for a proposal, when you've got a client that's interested in a bulk order, when you're pitching for a service engagement, you're almost always or very commonly competing with other companies. Indeed, when you first get the business, you're almost always in that situation. Sometimes if it's repeat business, which is the best business, then it's less competitive. But when you're first trying to engage with a client, you're almost always in competition with someone else. And if you don't understand about your competitive environment, you're effectively flying blind. So you're guessing and you're hoping that what you are offering is the best offer, that your pricing is correct, that your offering is correct, that your competitors haven't outmaneuvered you, and failing to get that information, get that understanding of your competitors, means that you'll almost inevitably lose a lot of deals. And this can cost companies, sort of mid-sized companies, millions of pounds a year if they're failing to understand their competitive environment and therefore losing business in that way. So that's kind of the sales intelligence part of it, the win-loss part of it. But it's a broader thing. It feeds in. If you have an ongoing competitive intelligence function, it should feed into throughout the business and how it operates, so you become more and more effective, that you gain learnings, that you move faster, etc. So some of those applications of CI, as I said, sales enablement. So making sure that you win, that you have the understanding of your competitive environment that enables you to win as many deals as possible. And that is, winning deals, getting revenue is absolutely critical to companies. Early warning signs. So you get alerts when, say, a competitor is changing their offering, a new competitor has entered the market, which is undercutting you. A There's some change in the technology that's going to potentially provide a substitute for your service. So any of that kind of information, you need early warning triggers to pick up on. Um, Benchmarking, so really assessing your offering and what you're offering your customers against your competitors to see where you're strong, where you're weak, and that can really guide your strategy about improving different areas. Technology assessments, how strong are you in the technology area? Threats and opportunities. So, where is it that my competitors have got a weak spot that I could exploit, and where are they very strong, where have they got a really good offering that potentially could lose me business. That both can feed into your strategy, what you work on and develop as a business, but also how your salespeople position you. So it might lead to your salespeople or your marketing people emphasizing a particular point because you know that your competitor is weak in that area, or making sure that they're addressing an area where they're where you know that competitors are stronger, and putting forward your case. Due diligence, sort of, it's not exactly competitor intelligence, but it tends to fall within this area because the skill sets are very similar. So when company is buying another company or buying an asset or something, they need detailed information about that organization, both lots of information about the finance and legal background, etc., but also operational information. And also they often generally want to go beyond what that organization is telling you. So if a company is up for sale, then they will communicate one version of their position, but that might not be the whole truth, right? Might be that their numbers look good at the moment, but if you dig into it, you find out that they are under severe competitive pressure, or there is some problem with their offering. So that same kind of skills that you use for competitive intelligence, really digging in and understanding a company, is also relevant for due diligence in the acquisition process. And then sort of ongoing environmental scanning and issue monitoring, uh, as I said, so feeding into that kind of early warning part. Next slide, please. So where does um, CI sit within market research? Um, so different types of projects have different tools, but generally speaking, CI tends to be dealing with slightly more restricted information, and slightly smaller volumes of information. It can be kind of quite indicative. It can be not hard information, but suggestions of things can give you a lot of, if you pick up on signals from your competitors, that can be very powerful. So if you compare sort of broad market research, maybe doing a big survey or something, and then reading public sources, that might be market research, reading publicly available information, industrial market research, like company reports and things. In competitive intelligence, you're starting to get into really looking into the companies and trying to find information that perhaps isn't in the public domain. And then beyond there, there's espionage, which is not something that we do or we would recommend, but that's really going in and spying. But the competitive intelligence part, there's nothing wrong with um, trying to, looking out for opportunities to get understandings of your competitors that they might not particularly want you to know, as long as you're not going in there and stealing that information. If they're letting that information drop, if there's something in their presentations that tells you something that's useful, if you speak to one of them and they're quite expansive about what's going on in their company, if you speak to someone, excuse me, who's left their company and tells you all about it, there's no law against that. There's nothing wrong with that. So the competitive intelligence, while it's definitely not espionage, it doesn't mean that it has to be stuff that your competitors would love you to know. In fact, some of the highest value stuff is things that they would prefer you didn't know. But it also, it covers that part, but it also covers just being very methodical about tracking the information that is publicly available, and also thinking about it and trying to think about and understand what that information means. Next slide. Um, so what is CI? It reduces risks, increases revenue by understanding the environment, or particularly the competitors, as opposed to the sort of broader environment who you're up against. Tends to be tactical versus strategic. So it's about reacting quickly to what your competitors are doing, maybe changing a bid for something, maybe uh, working on a particular product feature to outcompete somebody, etc. And then and it's not a espionage, it needs to be legal, ethical, and guided by the skip code of ethics. So there's a couple of organizations that I would point to you in competitive intelligence. The biggest one is skip, which I think stands for the Society of Competitive Intelligence Professionals. They're quite a big organization. They do quite a lot around this. They have a big conference every year in the US. And there's another one called the Institute for Competitive Intelligence, which is based in Germany. And both of them offer training, etc., on how to go about competitive intelligence. They're basically designed for in-house research teams to help them develop their competitive intelligence capabilities. And yeah, it's worth attending. I've attended quite a bit of the training from those organizations, and it's useful as a good creating, helping you with the ideas about how to go about this stuff. There's a couple of things that draw on that in this presentation, but this presentation obviously is a fairly high level introduction to the subject. And those organizations will give you a lot more depth. Um, uh, so one-off versus real-time tracking. So there's sort of essentially the process of competitive intelligence tends to fall into one of these two um, um, areas. So doing a one-off project um, gives a static view, can give you more a deep dive at a particular point. Um, Potentially the insights lose relevance over time. However, I think these kind of projects are really important in order to actually get when you're first looking at a market, or where you feel that you've kind of lost track of a market and you don't really understand what's going on. This tends, they can be very useful in terms of getting you up to speed. But you do have to understand that if you just do that once, once and then leave it 5 years, you're in danger that the information will be irrelevant or even inaccurate and push you in the wrong direction. So real-time tracking will help you keep up with things. It doesn't tend to be as labor intensive in the short term, like a one-off project to understand your environment. The business research company do a lot of these things on behalf of our clients. Can be often makes sense to ensure that you to use an outside provider for those one-off projects, because they will tend to be a potentially more skilled in this process, but also be able to speak to more people, because your competitors will tend to be very wary about speaking to you directly. Real-time tracking is the sort of ongoing process, tends to be more secondary based, tends to be more based on alerts and tracking tools that we'll talk a little bit more in a minute about in a minute. But um, um, yes, it can also involve some primary, but I think we would generally advocate a combination of the two, doing a one-off project to understand your environment, and then setting up some kind of tracking system ongoing, so that you're sort of alerted about what's going on.
Hello, everyone. Do we have any questions? All right, then. I've put the link to our website in our chat box along with an exclusive offer. So, anybody willing to look at that, please have a look. And please do let us know your questions.
So what should you track? Strategy, products or services being rolled out, their pricing, are they doing any M&A, hiring patterns, location tracking. So lots of different things there, um, which can be important to understanding how your both what your competitors are offering at the moment. Hi Casper, yeah, just give me 1 second. In fact, I can put them in the chat for you. So it's let me just finish this slide first. So yes, all those different um things. So some of them are kind of direct and immediate, but the other thing is to be picking up the signals of what's coming. So it could, the pricing could be something that you need to react to immediately, or a new product release, but things like hiring patterns, locations, that can really indicate what they're planning to do. Maybe, what's going to hit you in 12 months, 14 months time. If they're hiring a whole bunch of AI programmers, they're probably planning to release something AI enabled in their offering, right? If they're hiring a bunch of people in Brazil, they're probably looking to strengthen to launch or strengthen their offering in those areas. And there's different ways you can track those different things that I'll talk a little bit more about, but again, it's a more detailed subject. But um, things like looking at LinkedIn can be very useful, and hiring sites, Glassdoor, things like that, where they're more employee focused or hiring focused, can give you a lot of indications about what a company is planning to do. Then positioning, so kind of understanding where they're strong, where they're weak. Talking to people who've worked for the company in the past is very good for that. They'll tend to give you, particularly people who've left the organization, will tend to give you an honest opinion. In most markets, companies will say they do everything, right? If you look at our website, it'll show all the sort of all the elements of market research, but we're really strongest in kind of B2B market research. We don't do as much of the customer surveying type of research. That might not come through if you look at someone's website or what they put out in the marketing, because everyone's generally trying to win business across a what as much as they can. But if you talk to people, you'll really understand where their focus is, where they're strong, where they're weak, where they're trying to build things up. Um, Yeah, and then more immediately competitive moves, go-to-market tactics, messaging shifts, how they're doing. Are they being successful or unsuccessful? Have they won any big contracts? Do they have any big contracts? There's a whole area of kind of contract tracking where you can monitor, the most important contracts in your market. Depends what, this is definitely within the B2B space and particular areas within that. And then, you can see vulnerable contracts which are coming up from your competitors. And there are databases that can give that kind of information, certainly in the area of IT, but also in some other markets. So you can really target in on, contracts that can win you business. Um, yes, going back to those two different organizations. So it's the Institute for Competitive Intelligence, I think shortened to ICI, but Institute for Competitive Intelligence. That's the German one, European focused one, and then the Society of Competitive Intelligence Professionals, or SKIP. Um, and we'll perhaps some of you can find the websites for them and put them in the chat. So, and then in terms of moving on to sort of more the process of it. So if it's a project, the typical cycle is similar to most research projects. So it's direction, working out what questions you want to answer, um, uh, um, deciding on your methodology, etc. Collection process, processing, pulling in all that data, and this part is particularly important for a CI project because it's often not a matter of, you don't get sort of big hard data in the way that you might from a market survey exercise. You don't get hundreds of data points in a structure. It's a lot about picking up signals, trying to understand what something means, scenario, talking through different scenarios, etc. So there's a lot of kind of thinking and discussion that goes into the analysis part of a CI project because you're often getting signals or suggestions rather than pure, direct information, right? They're hiring 10 people with this skill set in Egypt, right? What does that mean? What are they doing? It doesn't, you're not getting a press release that says they're doing this in Egypt. You're getting an indication. This person's left the company. This was the person who was leading this part, right? So these are signals, and so first, the analysis and processing analysis part is particularly important. And then dissemination, getting that information to your decision makers. You might be the decision maker who's receiving it directly from a provider like ourselves, or it might be that you're the research professional providing it within your company. Um, but working out how to communicate that clearly to your decision makers so that they can make decisions based on it. And often that means giving some values to uh, the quality of the data, the how sure you are of the data, because it's often not 100%, but you're giving them indicative information, but saying, we're 60% sure or 80% sure that this is what's going on. And that also gives you some protection if it turns out that it's not quite right. And then real time, that's the sort of one-off project, and then real time alerts, monthly briefs, quarterly reviews, etc. Well, this is really about picking up things early, maybe not as in depth, maybe more stuff it'll tend to be more stuff that's in the public domain, but making sure you're on top of all of that for all your key competitors and you've got alerts going off when things change. Next slide. How do we go about it? There's basically three forms of key research processes. There's primary research. Uh, so as we talked about already, this could be talking to people in the company, could be talking to their competitors, could be talking to people who've left their company, could be talking to their customers, could be talking to industry experts. So there's a whole bunch of different things there under primary research where you can pick up information. Then there are a large number of tools available which allow you to do ongoing tracking. And I've got another slide that talks a little bit about the different types of those tools. And then secondary research, so filings, patents, press releases, monitoring their website, job posts, etc. So um, looking for that secondary publicly available desk information. And these things tend to have a different um, they tend to be different in terms of how of the difficulty of gathering them, of the expense of gathering them, but also of the value of those insights, right? So open sources, internet, online databases, etc. So those tend to be higher volume, lots of news coming out, lots of information on their website, etc. But lower value. A, because it's in the public domain. B, because it's kind of tends to be what they want you to know rather than what you might be interested in. Then there are databases and files. I would actually probably put, online databases like um, uh, paid for sources within this group, slightly higher value, slightly lower volume. Perhaps not everybody's aware of them. Internal sources, company sources. So this is a really critical thing is utilizing your own people, right? So the salespeople, your sales team and your marketing team, particularly your sales team, are both your important customers for this kind of competitive intelligence, but they're also important sources for it. So if you can pull in the information that your salespeople are gathering, and disseminate that to the around the sales group and to your management, that in itself can be very valuable. So, what are they hearing about your competitors from the customers they speak to? Where are they winning and losing business? What rumors are going around the industry? So internal pulling together your own internal resources in terms of this understanding is a really critical role of the competitive intelligence person, not just going out and doing, not you don't have to think that everything has to be new, fresh research done by you and communicated to other people. And then the highest value information tends to be human intelligence. That's primary research, talking to people, as we've been talking about, and I'll give a little bit more information on that. There's also what's called observational intelligence. So, this is anything where you're basically looking at the competitor to find out information. So in some cases, companies do things like they actually observe the factories that their competitors are using to see how busy they are, to see whether that's changing, etc. Much are they shipping to different retailers or distributors, etc. So again, it doesn't have to be something that's in written form or a conversation. Any information that you can pick up on a competitor is of value, even if it's even, including looking at them, looking at their operations, looking at the products they produce. And people do things where they dismantle the products of their competitors to understand more about them. But that stuff is a lot slower, a lot more expensive. Getting hold of the right people, getting them talking is difficult and time consuming. But the value of the insights and the rarity of the insights tends to be much higher. Next slide, please. So there's a lot to be said about uh, um, thanks, Caspar, about the value about the ways of going about elicitation or primary research, and there's a whole bunch of different techniques to use. One of the key ones is what's called elicitation. So one of the most common questions we get when we are pitching for business, people say to us, "Oh, like people won't talk to you. You're saying you're going to do 10 interviews with our competitors. They won't give any information." But our track record is, and if you know what, if you're good at it, that you can get a lot of information. Takes time, takes determination, takes repetition it is a slow and a time-consuming process, and it costs money, but you can get very good information. One of the reasons is that, if you use the right techniques when you get to speak to people. So if you go to one of your competitors and say, "Tell me about your strategy and your finances," they're not going to tell you. But if you use some of these techniques, and within for utilized at the right time within conversations, they often can. So provocative statement. So if you say something like, "Oh, I know that so and so, a third party, is doing really well in this market." "Oh no, we're doing just as well as they are," right? So they're more likely to say that than to come out with it otherwise. Reformulation. So when they say something, you recreate what they said in a slightly different form, and they'll often respond to that and give more detail. Quid pro quo. So it's important in these interviews to position yourself as part of their market, as having some expertise and not just doing a survey. And there's more stuff on that as well. Flattery is pretty self-explanatory. It's cynical, but frankly, getting often getting if you have a middle-aged man, it's a good idea to get a woman to speak to them. They tend to be more open. That's just the realities of life. Restatement, as I said, so saying the same thing that they said, they'll often build out from it. Naive mentality, um, you know, pretending that you kind of need to be taught about the market. So it's a bit different. You can choose between this and the quid pro quo positioning, but people like explaining things. These people don't necessarily have fantastically interesting jobs, and somebody's coming along and really interested in their what's going on in their light bulb factory. Um, uh, they give Many people given the opportunity will quite enjoy explaining it to them. So even if you do know some things, you pretend you don't in order to get them talking, get them explaining. Challenging, I think we've spoken about offering some confidential information in return. Again, that builds up your status. Um, Disbelief, so that they have to reinforce and prove what it is that you're saying to them, they're saying to you, sorry. And then opposing um, stance, again, triggering them to respond. Suggestive, so giving some input. Thanks, Sitaram. Thank you for that. I'll have a look at your email. Um, Next slide. Um, Monitoring tools. So that was talking about human intelligence. Quick look at monitoring. There's a number of different types of tools. I'm not going here into to the names of them particularly, but the first thing to think about is what type of tool do you want. So do you want something that's looking at the broader environment, news, results, context for your competitors? So things like Factiva, AlphaSense, those kind of things are of that type. Strategic, which is really picking up on the signals and things from the company itself is producing, but doing that in a very um, alert and responsive way. Then there's marketing, so things that pick up on their web presence, traffic, keywords, backlinks, etc. Things like SEMrush and various others. There are particular uses, so technology. This is more for uh, tech companies, but can give other indications. So there are companies that provide information on the tech stack that your competitors are using, and then personnel, LinkedIn, Glassdoor, etc., and things that monitor them and update you on them, um, to see what's going on with their people movement, hiring, firing, etc. Okay, so I've talked a little bit about one of the key techniques in human intelligence and a bit more about monitoring. Obviously, in this short presentation, I don't have time to go through all of it in detail. So there's more detail behind all of these things within the process of competitive intelligence. Next slide. And how do you utilize these things? So strategically, the management should be thinking about competitive countering threats, exploiting weaknesses. Sales should be getting battle cards, knowing the objections they're going to get in advance. Okay, oh, this competitor's really good at this, they're better than you. It's not ideal, but it's better if they know information about that in advance and they've got arguments against it. uh, Ability to adjust prices, etc. And then more long-term adapting a product or services strategy based on responding to what your clients are doing and learning from what your clients are doing. Your competitors are doing. Sorry. Next slide. Yeah. So how do you set this thing up? Embedding CI into your organization, having a research department, doing a lot of your own research, using external agencies like us for particularly in-depth parts or to help you set things up to do a kickoff study in CI or to create trackers and then you can maintain them, etc. Monitoring KPIs. So how effective is it being? How what's your win rate? How quickly are you responding? And then making sure that you're maintaining governance and compliance. Next slide. Okay, I think we'll skip the case studies as we're a bit tight for time, Soumya. Is there anything else you want to mention or any questions you want to ask?
All right, we do have two questions in the chat, Falguni. And I think we can add the case studies in the recording and the copy of the presentation that we'll share with everyone else.
Lovely.
Yeah, Falguni, could you please tell us the
Yes,
questions?
so we have a question, Oliver. Why is competitive intelligence so important right now?
It has
Um,
an emphasis on the timing, like the question had right now.
I think as you were saying at the start, Soumya, just because the environment is more dynamic than it often is. The changes affected being affected by tariffs and Trump, etc. Uh, it might be that particular competitors are being badly affected by that, and that gives you an advantage. You might, being aware of, say, okay, one of our main competitors is from Brazil and they've got very high tariffs on them that's adding to their costs and making them less competitive. Okay, I can take advantage of that, etc. It's a mean old world. You've got to try and do these things. So I think just because it's a slightly more volatile business environment at the moment, competitive intelligence is particularly important, but it's always important. I mean, I think at any given time you could make a case for why it's specifically important at that time, but the ongoing picture is that successful companies monitor their competitive environment ongoing.
We have one other question, Oliver.
Yeah.
It's what's one quick step a company can take to get started with competitive intelligence?
Yeah, so I would normally advocate to do a one-off study if you're kind of starting from a fairly low base. That will give you a really good starting point, get you some more in-depth information, some more kind of color around your competitors because you've talked to some people, not just having what they're presenting of themselves, but the reality behind it. Uh, so a one-off study, I would obviously advocate using a company like ourselves. You can do it yourself as well, though it's difficult, time consuming, and there can be advantages of going out house on it. Um, but then setting up a process of continuous monitoring, both external with triggers, etc., and internal talking to your sales team, talking to the people who interact with the environment. So you're picking up information all the time.
All right, Oliver, that makes sense. I think let's move on from the cases and conclude the webinar.
Yes, please. As Sonia said, we'll circulate this at the end for people if people are interested.
Yes, so we will be sharing the recording and the presentation with everyone who's attended.
Good. So did you want to talk through that last slide, Sonia, or are we going to wrap up?
I guess we can wrap up if we're not continuing with that, but I could add a bit to it. Like you said, having an eye on what your competitor is doing at any point of time, may it be now or in the future, all the times are as equally important as they are, because getting to know what your competition is doing not only enables you to look at the blue ocean that you might be missing, but as well as gives you an opportunity to at least be a step ahead in the red ocean that you might be in. So it's very important that you keep a track of what they're doing, you benchmark with them, and then you look at what are the new things that you can think of and implement strategically. So, yeah. And if you want any help with that, you can always contact the business research company for a complimentary consultation with one of our experts. And that's all. So, thank you so much, everybody, for your time. And we'll be seeing you in the next webinar. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.